I didn't realize that he took books out of the Bible. I just always thought that Catholics had extra books. Okay, Mary, I trust in you. Like, lead me to the cross. If this is how it is, like, lead me to the cross. In that moment, I remember thinking, okay, God, I really want to worship you in the faith of Catholicism. Like, I love it.
You guys need to subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe.
Thank
Sure.
you. Yep.
Yeah, starting the podcast is always like it's the worst thing. I'm not good at it. So this is podcast 25 now.
Oh,
That is crazy.
let's go.
Estelle Abramides.
Uh-huh. Nice.
You nailed that.
You've got it.
Like and subscribe. Thanks for coming on.
Comment down below. Can you spell Abramides?
Yeah, actually.
I bet you can't.
Try.
Ben will give you $5 if you can spell it correctly in the comments. The people that don't know her.
You know what? I actually will. If someone,
Really?
I'll cash app someone if the first person who gets it right.
That's actually a good idea. We should start.
Let's see it.
We should totally do that. Yeah, we'll cash app you.
Yeah.
Or Google Pay. Not Venmo because I can't log into my
Venmo?
Venmo.
You still locked out of
I need to call them.
I'll get very well though. So Estelle, it's really great to have you.
Thanks.
Welcome to the
It's
podcast.
great to be here. This is a great setup.
Yeah,
It's great so far.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing something.
Yeah.
we really are.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
You mentioned that your dance intensive though.
Yeah.
So, as someone who I just kind of did dance. Like my mom's
Right.
it was like my dad's like, hey, I used to wrestle. He said, all right, you need to do tap dance, light feet, and be really good at wrestling. I'm like,
Okay.
okay.
Need some grace in there somewhere.
I was like 8 years old. Like I don't know. I gotta be good at wrestling, but okay. It was fun,
Uh-huh.
but it was just kind of a fun thing. But I also know
Right.
people that really, really take dance seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So
That was me.
was
For
it?
sure. Oh, yeah. Like, when I was, I don't know, maybe 8, I realized that I started dance when I was about 4. But when I was around 8, I would say was when I realized, I want to be a pro. I want to do this professionally. This is it for me. I want this to be my life. And, in order to kind of be a professional dancer, you have to normally graduate from, the top schools in the country. And then, you go on from there and hope to get a contract with a company, wherever it's at. And so I kind of realized that. And so when I was around 10 years old, my parents and I found this actually Russian teacher in the area, and she was producing a lot of professional dancers. So we were like, okay, I was like, this is it. I know it in my spirit. I know in my bones. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go full out. So I started there when I was 10. And, the problem with loving something so much is sometimes you can start to idolize it, right? And that became my life for the next 5 years. I started to idolize dance a ton, but not only that, I started to idolize my teacher. And if she, I just wanted her approval all the time. And the problem with that as well is in the ballet world, it's very fickle. So one day you would be her favorite and she'd be complimenting you all day long and saying whatever. And then the next day she would be saying you out crying in tears in the hallway. And I mean, for a 12, 13-year-old, it's a little bit rough because you're like, what is going on right now? And, the worst times was when you would just kind of be ignored and you'd be like, what is going on? What did I do wrong? And, it was just rough because I was on this roller coaster of emotions. I didn't really know or understand any of it all. And one time she came in and she was like, oh, if you all lost 1 pound, you would all look so much better as a group. And I know it was pretty rough. And as a young 13-year-old and, you're staring at yourself in the mirror for 5 hours a day and a leotard and tights. I mean, it's kind of rough for body image. And so that was something that, I struggled with for a while, as well as I would say jealousy. There was so much jealousy in the studio. That's a big thing for dance is especially with girls, it's all kind of a big, you want to be the best in there and that's it. That's what you live for. That's what you strive for. And there was a lot of comparison. And yeah, I remember there would also be times where people would ask questions and our teacher would be like, that's a stupid question. I'm not going to answer that question. And so I would become very scared to open up or talk or raise my hand even in class. And I kind of became a shell of a person. And when I was around, and I didn't tell anybody about it either because I was I think because of the control in that studio and what I was facing there, I wanted to control as much of my life as possible. And so I didn't really show any cracks. I was everything's good. My parents would ask me how dance was. I was it was good. And that's how I would leave it. And around the age of 14, I think, was when my parents realized, okay, something's going on. She's super quiet. She doesn't have any, joy anymore. She's just kind of not herself, I guess. And my mom like never really, she was not your typical like dance mom who was like involved. She didn't really come to the studio that much, which I appreciated. I was like, I kind of wanted my space, you know. But then she caught wind of like other dancers in that studio going through the same like process and the same just like not being themselves from other moms, and she thought to herself, okay, there's something going on here, like I should check it out. So she started to come into the studio and watch classes, and I was mad because I was like, I knew what could happen if they decided to pull me out, and that was like the last thing I wanted, because again, this was like my everything. This is what I did. And yeah, and so I mean she realized what was going on, and her and my dad talked, and they pulled me out when I think it was the end of being 14 for me. I would have just turned 15, and it was Nutcracker season. It was in December. Yeah, it was rough. And it was funny because 2 weeks before Nutcracker, I remember they were like, okay, so this will be your last show here. You're leaving. And I was like, what? And I was like mad. Because I mean, it was everything I ever knew. And it was just kind of like all crazy to me. And like when you're 15, just turned 15 too, it's like, you know, it's the end of the world because you're just like, everything's dramatic, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, I didn't tell anybody that I was leaving. I was just like hoping and praying that somehow, some way my parents would change their minds, but they didn't. So I was pulled out of there, and that whole December was kind of like, it was kind of a growing process, I guess, for me, because I had to let go of a lot and kind of change my whole look on life, because something that this teacher would also say is like, I'm the best you'll get in this area. Like you won't find, you know, better dance instruction here than here. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I want to go pro, whatever. And so I had some good family friends actually who were dancing at Praise's Name at the time. And I had been to a few shows from Praise's Name because of them, because I would go and watch their shows. And when they heard that I had been pulled out of dance there, they were like, hey, like, do you want to come and just try out Praise's Name? Like, just give it a go. What can it hurt? And I was like, no, like, I want to like somehow get out of this state. I want to somehow go on to like maybe another school somewhere, figure out that I still want to go pro. But the thing is like, at the end of the day, I had to let go of a lot of pride there, and a lot of, again, that control factor, and a lot of like trying to make my life go the right way it was going to go. Because I mean, at 15, I wasn't going to be able to move out. My parents would have never allowed that. They would have been like, what are you doing? No. So yeah, I took one class at Praise's Name because I was like, what's it going to hurt? I'll try it. And basically I stayed there for the next 5 years of my life.
Could you
And I'm still there.
explain what Praise's Name is?
Yeah. So Praise's Name with dancing is, it's a dance studio, but like it's more than that really. Cause it's not only like we're trying to build dance technique, we're also trying to build community. And, but that's like through worship and through prayer, and we all have like one common goal. So it's really cool because we're all kind of united like as one body in Christ in a sense. And what's beautiful about Praise's Name too is I was learning recently, because I'm doing RCAA right now, and I was learning recently from my classes that there are 33,000 different Christian denominations, and that's just insane to me. And I'm like, and the amount of also just like the amount of pain and strife that it causes between family members, like with different denominations and friendships and like all of that stuff, and the amount of like debates you have and whatever. But I Praise's Name with dancing, like in my company, for instance, we have Catholics, we have Protestants, non-denominationals, or like Baptists. We have like everything basically. I would want to say we have so many different ones, but yet we all come together for these shows to worship God, and we all pray together, and we all like have one goal for those show weekends. And it's so beautiful because like it almost gives me chills to think like this is kind of almost like glimpse of heaven. You know what I mean? This is how it's going to be like us all worshiping and us all adoring our King. And so yeah, it's a really cool place to be, and I've definitely enjoyed my last 5 years there. But
There's like a deep difference between that kind of like, because you can really kind of like compare and contrast with like the ballet thing, where like before your time it's like it's all more about like the ego and comparison and competitiveness with everyone else, and then the other one you move over to Praise's Name, and all of a sudden it's like it's about actually unifying everyone into like you're not dancing for yourself anymore, you're dancing like literally to just glorify God.
yeah,
It's just such a beautiful thing. We've been lucky enough to go to a few shows, and I mean they're just spectacular every single
They
time.
really are. And like watching the people pray before, like is awesome, because you see it like so seldom like Tim Tebow, like back in the day. You'd pray a little bit before. Like, it wasn't something you really saw. And to see young people doing that on a regular basis was beautiful.
Right.
And what Praise His Name does is fantastic, because I would like to talk a lot more about Praise His Name. It really super interesting. But so was it, I guess one question I had is like transitioning from like that ballet, like going that professional route to just dancing for really like Jesus and just the joy of dancing. How did like that mentally, how hard, like when you had to give up like your dream, how did that process look?
At first it was rough. My first semester especially, I Praise His Name, because I was slowly letting go. I would say, of a lot of my past, of a lot of those dreams that I had, and I still had them in my mind. Like, I thought maybe somehow, maybe some way, I'll still land some contract somewhere with some company and, go from there. And what was really cool though, actually, was that semester, that summer, I went to a summer dance intensive, is what we call them in the dance world. They're like 2 to 8 weeks in the summer, and you go to a top ballet school and you get to like study under the top instructors there and learn from the best. And so I had the chance to go to Jackson, Mississippi and study for 4 weeks at America's premier Christian ballet company, Ballet Magnificat, and they tour the world spreading the gospel through dance.
Wow.
And yeah, they're really cool people, and I got to stay there for a while. But what was awesome about it was I got to meet a lot of the company dancers and like form relationships with them as well. And so there were 3 in particular that I was able to get close with, and 2 of them got married and like started their own company in Iowa, and then another one left for Tennessee, because that's a lot. But that a lot of times that's what they do. They all like leave and they'll start their own companies and whatever. And so anyways, I kept in touch with them, and when I was around 16 years old, they actually both ended up offering me like the chance to come and dance with them. They were like, hey, like, we're going to try to go professional. We're going to try to tour. We're going to try to do all this stuff. We're going to try to get like pay set up for our dancers. Would you be willing to like consider moving to, well, one of them was in Iowa and the other one was in Tennessee. So Iowa or Tennessee. And I think I was 16 at the time. And it was funny because like a year prior, I would have totally been like, yes, like this is everything I wanted, whatever. But at that point, I had started to build all these relationships at Praise His Name with people. And I was in a good spot with my family and all of my friends. And I just felt the Lord was calling me to stay in Akron and in the Akron area. And basically I didn't have a peace about it. And I said, not right now. Like, it's not the right time. I know it's not. So I didn't go. But I stayed in touch with them. And so like the next year after, I was 17, they asked again. And that summer I was trying to figure out what I was doing because I'd graduated a year early. So I was like, so am I going to go to college? Am I going to go to dance? What am I doing here? And I ended up saying no again because the Lord just opened up doors at Akron to go for political science and philosophy and hopefully law school. And yeah, that was that for me. It all worked out so well in the end. It was crazy. Like even the classes that I was able to get for the days that I needed at Akron, like just came together, and it was August, I think, and I was planning out like my classes for the next week, and it was crazy. But yeah, it just all worked out, and I stayed there at Praise His Name, and I mean I started teaching classes as well, which was awesome. And so like just to see like little kids and how much they love dance and how excited they get about it and how passionate they get about it as well, it's just a blessing for sure. And yeah, it's inspired me to keep going, honestly, just to see them, excited and to see them joyful about it all.
Yeah,
because when that season comes around for like especially like the winter dance, like they go through, it's kind of a nutcracker thing, but it's like they go through the whole Bible,
right?
And like that's beautiful, but it's like that time for them. They're so excited to go through that, and anyone who's ever been to one of those, everyone's singing, dancing. It's not like a normal ballet where you're like,
yep, yeah, they're all involved. The audience is totally involved.
It's a little like rock concert. It really is. It's
right.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's literally a concert.
Yeah, we were talking upstairs that it's kind of broken up into different like age ranges, but it's not like level 1, level 2. So it's
right. Which is what's so awesome is our artistic director, Mrs. Hoffman. She had this kind of vision, I guess, to not have ballet 1, ballet 2, ballet 3 for levels, because it was like, well, she didn't want people comparing themselves and saying, oh, I'm under this level, so I'm not that great or whatever. Instead, they have these Bible verses that each company will come up with. And then they have a word that stands out from those Bible verses that they call themselves as a company. And so like my company, Soli Deo Gloria, it means the glory of God alone. It's Latin. And then under us is faithful. And then I think victorious, and then treasured. And then it just keeps going. And they all have these incredible names. And like they're all able to kind of unite under that name in a sense and be like, oh, like this is our scripture, this is epic, like this is who we are, you know, and have that as their identity rather than like, oh, I'm ballet 3, okay, so I have to step it up to get it to ballet 4, or at least I'm over ballet 2, you know what I mean? So it's a different view, it's a different mindset, a different way to view things, I guess.
It's healthy. I mean, it's like you said, it's your work glorifying God in it,
right?
It's not just
exactly
like how it was for you back like you're trying to get professional. It's like how you're being better than everybody else, comparing yourself constantly.
Yeah.
Like that's,
and it's building character too.
Yeah.
For all these kids, which is amazing. So, yeah.
Names are just so important too, because they just like they humanize everything, and they contextualize everything as like a sort of like a creation of God almost, right?
Yeah.
Like because God created everything, but He gave us the opportunity and like the authority to kind of like name stuff as a way to kind of like bring it back to Him, right? Like kind of sharing that glory. And like that's one of those things that it just adds like a new character. Whereas like if you just have like 1, 2, 3, like it just everything is dehumanized, right? Like it's just completely dehumanized.
Just a number. Like
you're just a number. Yeah, I'm trying to think like what movie is that from? Like there's like I swear there's like some movie where like people are all numbers, but then all of a sudden someone comes up with the name, and then like the story changes.
I feel like there is
probably is.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah. If not, we're copywriting this right now.
There you go. Yeah, dude. I just had a revelation.
Literally,
it's, like, it's time to write a
here
book.
on this podcast right now. History is going down.
Awesome. So, the Praise's name obviously is a Christian dance company. Is that what they founded it like to be? Like this is for God, of God. Is it like is there a denomination behind it, or is it just?
Not really. And again, I guess that goes back to the beauty of it all, is just like all of these different denominations are able to come together, and we're all able to say, okay, like we serve one God. And that's who we want to worship, and that's who we want to glorify, and that's who we want to bring honor and praise. And like, I mean, I think we started in a YMCA. I think that was the like origin story. I want to say it was, I'm not sure. But I think we started in a YMCA, and then like people just heard about it and they started coming, because I mean it's kind of a new concept, is like dancing for Christ. Like it's not been around for a ton of time, and it's gotten more and more popular. Like I said, there's more dancers going off and starting their own companies, which is awesome. But yeah, so our artistic director, Mrs. Hoffman, had this vision and she started it. And I mean, you know, the homeschool community, like everyone runs in circles, so everyone kind of heard about it and they were like, oh, let's bring our kids here, and yeah, it just became a huge thing.
Yeah, and it's beautiful too. Like that's the big thing. Like there's such an importance to have like to create beautiful things, I think, especially nowadays, because everything nowadays is just so drab and kind of the same, and AI, and like it's all generated, and like everything is just kind of like there's no beauty anymore, I feel like. And this is one of those things that really denotes like what true beauty is, because like you said, like it's such a unifying thing. Like it's able to pull in these like different denominations that, you know, historically have never gotten along with one another, right? But now all of a sudden it's like, you know, you do something like create beauty, like you dance, you sing, and all of a sudden like you just realize like when you praise and worship, like that's one of the core things, right? It brings everyone back together.
For sure. Yeah.
Especially for young girls too, that to have a good environment to go into as they're forming, like as they're becoming teenagers and adults, to have that good group of friends praising Christ on their free time, rather than going and praising themselves, like I mentioned before. That's what I find really, really cool about like Praise's name. And also, how many Christian songs did they come up with? Like to make like there's always a different song that I've never heard before.
Right?
It's so
I find it incredible too. I'm like, I don't even understand sometimes. And even some of the songs, because for our classes we use all worship songs as well. And I mean, they're always different. Like our teachers are always coming up with these new, I don't know, indie, folk, Christian playlists that are just out of the blue that I would never assume even existed. But it's really cool too, because again, it's a way to, you know, support other Christian artists as well by using their music in our shows. and by also like promoting them, I guess, in a way. So yeah, it's a good time.
They pull in
really
big
cool.
audiences.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
big audiences.
yeah.
Just do like 3 shows a day or on that weekend.
Yeah. So June show is 3 shows. So we have 2 shows on Saturday during June and then 1 show on Sunday. So it's a whole weekend. And like Fridays are dress rehearsal and Thursdays are set up. So it's just we're there all week. And then during December, so for our Christmas show, we have 2 shows. We have 2 on Saturday and that's it. So we have like a late night though. We start our second show at 7 and we probably get done with that around 10 because it's like 3 hours. It's a long show.
Ooh,
It's crazy. And then we have to like tear it all down, right? And normally it's snowing or it's cold or something because it's December. And so we're taking out all of our props and putting them in the truck in the freezing cold. We're all like bundled up, and we're taking them back to the studio, back to the unloading area. And then we all go back to our artistic director's house at the end of the day. And we have like this big, I don't even know what you call it. It's like this big thing of pasta. It's cheesy pasta. I don't even know really what it is, but it's so good because you're just so dead. And it's 2 a.m. in the morning. And yeah, I could eat that pasta for days. It's wonderful.
It's 5 at 2 in
It
the
hits
morning.
different, trust me.
there are some foods that do that, like the 2 a.m. foods, like Taco Bell, pasta.
Taco Bell is the midnight run, for sure.
Do you guys sleep there? Or?
Normally what happens is we'll watch the show because we'll record it and then we'll watch the show after. And then we'll go home at like 4 a.m. It's a long night. But
Luckily, everyone's homeschooled. Well, not everyone, I guess, but for the most part, most people are
Right.
homeschooled, right?
all right. And also at that point, normally school is over for the most part. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's like,
that's true.
I think it's the 3rd week or 2nd week of December.
Okay.
But yeah.
But it's nice, like it's like the high schools are out late, but you know that they're like with good people doing good things. They're not out
Right.
and doing bad things.
They're in a safe environment. They're all good.
They are.
They're chilling.
And you mentioned RCIA,
Yeah.
and so I know obviously it's a new thing for you. RCIA is like what, a 6-month process.
Is it 6 months? I started in September and it goes till March, so I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's around there.
So let's talk about
All of
that fun journey.
Right.
And except
Yeah.
just obviously going to RCIA is a long process.
Yeah.
So growing up, obviously you weren't Catholic.
hmm
Were you big Protestant? Do you have a certain denomination that you guys?
We were like non-denominational, which it's funny actually because my dad was very much like he was not a big fan of joining any churches at all. Like, you know how a lot of people will be like, okay, I'm a member of this church or whatever. He was like, we don't do that. That's not us. And so growing up, I went to a few different churches and we were always non-denominational, is what we would call ourselves, I guess. And all of the churches I would go to, they just felt like one big party. There was no realness. There was no depth. There was no sincerity, I think, was always my biggest problem. Like I wanted that reverence. I wanted that reverence that comes with so much more of a deeper knowledge of Christ. That's how I felt. And I wasn't really finding Jesus at any of the churches I was going to. I mean, like they would preach the word of God and whatever, but like it wasn't deep. It wasn't real. And so I kind of went around for a little bit and, there was a lot of like prosperity teaching, like, oh, you'll be great. You'll do this. Just keep following God. He has great plans for you. But it's like, if we don't understand the gravity of our sin and like, if we don't understand all of that, how are we supposed to fully enjoy the beauty of God? How are we supposed to fully enjoy the depth of our salvation and what we have in that? And so, I don't know, for a while, I just felt very superficial. And I was kind of at this point, I think when I was 16, I think it was 16 was my first mass I ever attended. Because growing up, I'd also heard a lot of lies about the Catholic Church, right? And I'd never really gone to a mass or had I had like one Catholic friend, but we never really talked about anything spiritual growing up. It was just kind of like all like fun and games, whatever. And so then when I started going to Praise His Name, I met a lot of good Catholic people and I was like, these people actually love God. These people actually read their Bibles. Like, what is this? Because, I've been told this is a like all works-based faith. There's no actual faith in it. And, they never read their Bibles. They just follow whatever their priest says. That's all they do. And they bury statues of Mary like in their yards for good luck and all of that. Just like, yeah, crazy stuff. Really?
No, I never heard that.
My mom once told me a story like that. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, like it's like to help, I don't know, their houses sell. If they're like,
I've heard of burying Joseph.
okay, maybe that was it. It was one of those. It was one of those statues. And I just heard all these weird things, so I was like, ugh. But then again, just seeing all of these great people like living out their faith for God and living out the fruits of the Spirit, and seeing growth in their relationship with God as well. And yeah, I was 16. So what's funny about this too is I used to live an hour away. I grew up at a lake, which was awesome. Like, all of the fun stuff with that, jet skiing, tubing in the summer, skiing, boating, but I was really far from civilization. So like going places was rough. And I lived an hour from dance. So once I was 16, I was able to drive myself, which was nice. It was epic. But during the dance show weekends, I was like, why would I, go back and forth home like during those late nights and then have to go back up the next morning? So I would stay over at a friend's house normally. And the friend's house that I would stay over happened to be this Catholic friend that I had, and we grew really close during our last few years as high schoolers together. And I remember it was the June show, I think, of 2021. And we had just gotten done with 2 shows that Saturday. And so she woke me up and she was like, hey, we're going to mass. Like, you want to come with us? And I was like, sure. Like, I was like, I guess if they're going, I should go too. And so I got ready and whatever. And I went, and, some people have like a really cool first mass experience and they're like, oh, like the heavens opened and it was wonderful. But I was just terrified. Like, I remember getting there and I saw people genuflecting and kneeling, and I was like, what are they doing? Like, when do I stand? When do I kneel? Type of deal. And I was also extremely tired from the dance show before. So I was kind of living in the daze, and I was just like, what is going on? And I remember my friend, we were sitting there and they were about to go up and receive the Eucharist. And she said to me, she's like, oh, if you want to like come up, you can receive a blessing from Father if you like cross yourself and whatever. And I was like, no, I'm just going to sit here. I'm too scared to go up there. And I mean, after that, though, it opened up a lot of questions because I had no clue what was going on. And I was so confused. And, I had, I started asking her questions about it after that. And I started like saying, okay, so what does this mean? When they say this, what does that mean? And she was amazing. Like, she had so much patience. I don't know how she did because, I would ask a question and she would give me an answer. I'd be like, but why? Like, I don't understand that. And sometimes she would just be like, okay, because that's the way it is. Like, you have to accept it. And anyways, so that kind of went on for a little bit. And I think at that point, though, I still was young. I was still under my parents' house. I didn't really, I didn't really see a point of traveling deep, like into the Catholic faith and diving deep at that point in my life. But I still had a lot of questions about it. And I was still trying to figure it out. And then, let's see, I guess you can start to say, though, as I started to have more and more questions and I kept asking Catholic friends questions, people started to send me videos, right? So they started to send me like videos on YouTube, reels on Instagram, anything and everything podcasts. And for the first time in my life, I heard about Martin Luther and like who he was. Because I knew who he was. I knew he had like made our Bible, I guess, and whatever. That's kind of how I always envisioned him. But I didn't realize that he took books out of the Bible. I just always thought that Catholics had extra books. That was the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was funny because I remember a friend of mine sent a podcast. I can't remember which one it was, but this woman asked the question. She said, so do you believe that before Martin Luther stapled his 92 Theses together, that for 1,500 years after Jesus died, like no one went to heaven? And I was like, what? Because I didn't realize that the Catholic Church was the first church. Like, it was the early church. It was the first church. And like in believing that Martin Luther was like the savior of the world for that, I mean, that's placing the savior on him, not on Jesus. And that's like a worse form of idolatry in my mind than like believing Mary was perfect, right? And so I was like, okay. And that kind of started to open up, I guess, a can of worms in a sense, because I was like, okay, what is this man? And then I started to learn that he wanted to take out, apparently, I think it was James, Jude, Hebrews, and Revelation too as well. Mm-hmm. And those are like vital books in the New Testament. And that kind of freaked me out too as well, because I was like, am I missing out on something here? Like, are these 7 books of the Bible worth reading? Like, should I give it a shot? And so I remember, I think the first one I read with a friend was Ben Sira, and it was so good. I was like, whoa, this is like Proverbs, like on steroids, kind of. It was just so amazing. And yeah, I just started to dive deeper into that. And again, it kind of felt like I was missing out on something. Like I was getting this feeling of missing out in a sense, and something bigger, that I couldn't understand yet. And so yeah, so I kept kind of searching, and people kept sending me stuff. And one thing that's interesting is, as far as communion goes, for Protestants, we believe it's a symbol, but I always kind of thought of it as just as true body and blood, because growing up, I was taught to take it very reverently. Like, I was taught the scripture, people have gotten sick and whatever, and I've grown weak and fallen asleep because they haven't taken it with the right respect. And that always freaked me out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like, this is a real thing. And so I kind of always did believe that it was his true body and blood, because I also knew John 6. Like, I knew what it said there. But none of the churches I went to really, I guess, explained it theologically at all. And so I didn't really grasp the Protestant meaning of communion, and like that it was just a symbol that not a lot of people took it seriously until I think it was 2022. And I went to this 10-hour worship event in Kansas City. And it was actually at the Arrowhead Stadium, like where the Chiefs play, which was pretty cool.
That's big.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was like all of these big Christian seniors, Carrie Job, Cody Kearns, all of them came in. It was cool. It was awesome. And like all these people from around the world came in for this event. And so I got to go with a few friends, and it was incredible. And like, the presence of God was so real, and the freedom of God was so there. But when we all took communion together, Francis Chan, who was a big Protestant preacher and speaker, he came out and he said, listen, guys, like, I know you're all hyped up on Jesus right now. I know everything's awesome, but before we take this, like, we need to really examine ourselves, because it literally says in the Bible, like, people have gotten sick and weak from not taking it with the right respect. And he really as soon as he started talking, like, there was like this somberness that filled the room, and there was like this, like, I don't know, solemnness too as well. Like, it was just like everybody just took it with respect, and it was beautiful, to me at least. And I remember though going home from that event, and a friend of mine, she was like, I never realized that was a like verse in the Bible that talked about communion in that way. I never realized like that is something that could happen from not taking it in the right mindset. And then a lot of the girls around me like all agreed. They were like, yeah, like I didn't realize that was a thing, but it was cool. And that's when I also started to realize, okay, so if people are getting sick, if people are becoming weak and falling asleep from this, like, doesn't that imply there has to be something like there? Like, that implies there has to be something living there. That implies there has to be something actually present there. Like if you all are thinking of it as a symbol, like, that's not giving it any real importance, in a sense. And so, yeah, I remember watching this video from Father Mike Schmitz, who, everybody loves. And I think it was like Seek or something, one of those conferences. And he was talking about the Eucharist, and like how if you want Jesus, like if you want him physically there, like how can you not be a part of the Catholic Church? Like, if you believe in the Eucharist, like how can you not join the church? That's the only church that, takes it that way, that takes it that seriously. And that was a big kind of hit for me. But I was still like, I don't know, like there was still a lot, especially about Mary. I think Mary was always a big thing for me, that I just couldn't wrap my brain around. Anyways, but going on from that, so that was like when I was, I think 17, somewhere around there. And then I think it was like 2022. And then I'm trying to think, I think 2023 was the next time that I had like a big moment, because that was when a lot of my guy friends all of a sudden were talking about Exodus 90, and they're talking about like cold showers and all this weird stuff. And I was like, what's going on? And so then they explained to me like, oh, it's this fast, like this Catholic fast. And it sounded really cool. And I remember at the time, I think it was like right in January. And so, you have all your resolutions for January. And I was like, I just want to do a fast. Like, that'd be awesome. That'd be epic. And I remember thinking it'd be cool if there was a girls' version to this, right? And it was funny because two of my friends in my company at Praise His Name with Dancing, they were doing the girls' version. They were doing Fiat 90. And so they had mentioned it, and I was like, no way, like there actually is a girl's version of this. I was like, could I like do this with you guys even though I'm not Catholic? And they were like, oh yeah, totally, like just join us. Like, and they had meetings, they had Fiat 90 meetings, and so they gave me the times and whatever. And so I started showing up to those and doing Fiat 90. And what's really cool about Fiat 90 is it's meant to help like girls grow in certain Marian characteristics, right? And to bring girls closer to Jesus through Mary. And I didn't realize that at the time, but that was like a whole like thing. And
You got trapped.
seriously, really, I was just totally blindsided. But anyways, I started asking like all these questions I had about adoration and about the mass and about all of that during Fiat 90 meetings. And again, everyone had so much patience for me. I don't know how, but it was really cool and it was wonderful. And what was so amazing about it was seeing my friends not view their Catholic faith as like as a chore. I think that was something that I always thought about the Catholic faith is it's all this work. Like all they believe is they have to be good enough. They have to make the mark, right? And seeing them say, no, like this is a gift that brings us closer to Jesus. Like we love doing this because this is how we experience the fullness of his goodness and his grace. And that was just kind of a moment of, wow, okay, like, okay, I can get down with this. And I remember asking, I think my friend, I think it was Caitlin, I don't know if you know Caitlin Eby, she's awesome, but I asked her and I was like, hey, so like, why do you believe this stuff about Mary? Like, how is this relevant to your life? And she said, it brings me closer to Jesus. Like, and if it brings you closer to Jesus, why would you not want it? And that was something that really struck me because yeah, I mean, if it's going to bring me closer to Jesus, of course I want it. But at the same time, I had my preference and my like way I thought was the right way to worship God. So I was like, okay, like, yeah, but I can't truly believe this yet. Yeah. And so, yeah, I had my preference of worshiping God in my mind, I guess. And I went about it with that. And I finished up Fiat 90. My friend was awesome. She would send me novenas to pray. She would send me the surrender novena. And I was like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. And I would pray that. And I remember during praying that, I really was like, okay, God, like if there's a way that you want me to surrender my mindset towards Catholicism or anything of that sort, just like show me, like give me some type of sign, like help me to get over this pride or whatever it is that I have towards, or like fear, I guess. I think it was also fear in a way because I was like afraid to venture into like whatever it was. And so anyways, Fiat 90 ends and I am really confused at that point because I was like, I've heard all this great stuff about Catholicism and like I really want to enter into it. And I love how these people are worshiping God. I love their reverence. And that's something that I was missing in the Protestant church. But like, again, just Mary and just like, even just, I think there was also a lot of just fear of what my certain friends and certain family people would think. Like, what would they say about, you know, their friends joining Catholicism who had like, again, there's a lot of persecution against the Catholic faith, which is what I was also realizing during that time. A lot of people like just downplaying it and saying terrible things about it. And that was also something that kind of drew me to it because I was like, okay, where there's persecution, a lot of times you find Jesus. And that was something that, yeah, just it made me question it more. And so anyways, my one friend who I had met at Praise's Name as well, but she had left the company by that time, but we had stayed in touch. She started to invite me. She was like, hey, like you should come and you should worship Jesus with me under the crucifix. Like just come on Thursday nights and we'll go to the altar and just worship him together, because she wanted to like really show me just how welcoming the church was and just how like you can worship Jesus there. Like it's a place, it's a sacred place, you can be there. And so I started to go there on Thursday nights after dance. So I'd be like all sweaty in my dance clothes. And she would, normally I'd enter in through the chapel. And so she'd be in adoration. And I was like, what is going on? And then we would go into the sanctuary, or like the actual, I think you call it the sanctuary, right? Kind of? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And we would go up to the altar. We would just sit down and we would just worship under the crucifix. And she would sometimes bring her guitar in, and sometimes we would like sing songs like that. Sometimes we would just sing off of our iPhones. And it was so beautiful. And I just remember feeling so much peace and so at home. And I remember telling her that. She was like, enter into that, like keep going with that, like don't let that stop in your heart, like God is doing something. And it just was still, there was still like a block. I don't know what it even was, but there was still something that was just closed off there. And but I was trying to get to the bottom of it because I was like, I really do want to worship in this way. Like I was starting to, I was starting to love the Mass. Like I had gone a few times since my first Mass, and I was starting to really like love, I'm just loving also how Catholics worship Jesus in such a beautiful building. Like, you know what, like it's a sacred spot. It's where they want to experience his presence, and they have this, because I mean, even in the Old Testament, like, you know, God had a sacred temple built for him out of like gold and all the different jewels that you could ever imagine. And it just made sense to me. Like, I was like, I would want to, I mean, you can worship God wherever, but like, I would want to worship and have a sacred spot dedicated for him where I could go. And so that happened quite a few times during 2023 with my friend. We would worship together. And then there was the June show, I believe, where a lot of stuff went down for me, because I got the opportunity that year to do the lead role, which was awesome. And it was a great time, but it was a lot of stress. I'll put it that way. And I just remember the show week, I was kind of like, I don't think I can do this. This is just too much. And it was to the point where, I was kind of like sobbing on the ground, having one of those moments. And a friend of mine came over and just started praying over me. And she was Catholic, and she said, like, just think about Mary. Like, just think about her response to Jesus when, you know, she thought she was inadequate, when she must have been so afraid. Like, she's this, teenage girl, like, about to bear the Messiah. I mean, what the heck? But yet she, like, said yes, and she remained pure in that, and she remained holy in that, and she did not doubt the Lord. And I just remember that moment being like, okay, like, maybe I can open myself up to Mary a little bit. Maybe this week will be the week. Maybe I should just try it and just see what happens. And I remember during the show, and it's a Saturday to Sunday, right? And so I remember that first Saturday show just saying, okay, Mary, I trust in you. Like, lead me to the cross. If this is how it is, like, lead me to the cross. And it was incredible. Like, that whole show experience, every time I would think of Mary and I would picture her sacrifice, but then in turn I would picture Jesus' sacrifice, and I would picture his cross and his cross that he bore. And it was just like every single time, like, it was never me saying, oh, like, Mary, like, oh, she's wonderful, whatever. Like, it was a little bit of that, but like also like it was, no, but like her light guides me to Jesus' light, and her light like shines on her son. And that's what Catholics believe, and that's what their like whole doctrine is basically. And so that was incredible to me. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something real here. And it's really what got me through the show. I will say it definitely was an amazing experience. And I felt so close to the presence of God, so close to his spirit. But even then, I still was like, I don't know. Like, I kind of wanted, I think a sign from heaven, almost in a sense, because I was like, I just need like fire to rain down or something. Believe this, for me to go for it fully. But I remember reading also in this book from one of my friends had given to me along the way, and it was like, trust the little mysteries of the church, for they're there to prove your childlike faith in the Father. And that was another thing, going back to like Catholics are all based on works. No, there's so much faith involved, and there's so much beauty in that. And again, going back to even Mary, I was like, how can this logically be true? Like, where does it say so in scripture? Whatever. And I just really saw like, okay, but if it's bringing you close to Jesus, like, why would you not want it again? That kept coming up to my mind. And I just was like, okay, God, what do I do now? And I remember also in that time, I think it was a few weeks after the June show, and I was driving home. I was making the long drive home from Akron, and a friend of mine had sent me a video on this Protestant pastor who had converted to Catholicism, and he was talking about Mary, and he was talking about how much a mother loves her son, but how in turn how much a son loves his mother, and like that's like an unbreakable bond almost, in a sense. And he said a part of how he was able to get over his fear of like idolatry from Mary was that he realized he could not love Mary more than Jesus loved Mary. And that was like, okay. and in that moment, I remember thinking, okay, God, I really want to worship you in the faith of Catholicism. Like, I love it, and I've seen so much and all of this stuff, but it just was rough because I still was having doubts. And I remember on the way home praying, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Like, literally the whole, probably like for at least 30 minutes, a good half of that journey. And that in that moment, I just remember him saying to me, like, you have seen so much. It stirred so much within you these past 3 years. And if you can only trust me in these mysteries that you keep seeing, and you keep seeing the word mysteries, like, you will fall in love with me and know me so much more than you could ever imagine. And I felt him saying, like, it's time to stop dipping your toes and it's time to take the plunge. And after that, I was like, okay, this is my moment. Like, am I going to run in the opposite direction and like have a whole Jonah moment, or am I actually going to go for this? And I got home that night, and I called my friend and I said, hey, so what are the first steps to becoming a part of the church? And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And we had a whole moment. It was great. It was wonderful. And she got me like hooked up with a few people. She told me about RCIA and what that would entail. And it's just been incredible. Like, just the whole journey. I mean, it's still a learning journey for sure. I don't think it'll ever stop. But the fullness of the church and the beauty in the fullness of the church is just incredible. And what was really cool was a friend of mine was talking about how the church has all of the 5 love languages, right, for Christ. So it has physical touch, the Eucharist. It has quality time, adoration, words of affirmation, confession, when the priest is like, I absolve you of guilt. The gifts of service is like baptism, confession, basically all of the sacraments itself. And then what's the 5th one? What am I missing?
Gifts.
The gifts.
Did I say that? I think I said gifts.
I think you said, wait, can you list them off again?
So physical touch, quality time, acts of service. Oh, was the mass, and like entering into the mass, and just me and you also from the mass. Anyways, and what was crazy about that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. But, and like in any other denomination, you could say, oh, like quality time could be just time spent with Jesus, or words of affirmation could be Jesus speaking to you. But you can't get the physical touch anywhere. Like, you can't get the Eucharist anywhere else. And that was something that was inspiring to me. I was like, yeah, that's so true. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and RCAA so far has been insane. And I'm going through Sacred Heart of Jesus in Wadsworth right now. Mm-hmm. And it's just been so full of passion for Christ, of love for Christ, and the people are so welcoming and so wonderful. And yeah. And my first mass after deciding to become Catholic was like, I think the best. I was like on cloud 9. I was like, I remember I got ready for mass. I was so excited. And I went over to my friend's house because she always took me with her. And I was like dancing around. I was like, I'm going to go to mass. It's going to be awesome because like I believe everything and I'm all ready for this. And I remember we were walking into the church. I was like, so what is that thing you do when you like kneel and like you cross yourself or whatever? She's like, you mean genuflecting? And I was like, yeah, that. And so she taught me how to do that. And like even just going in with like the holy water as well, like entering in. And it just was, everything was exciting to me. Everything was like an act of love for Christ and everything that I did. And like even like I remember that was the first time as well. That was the first mass that I went up and I received the blessing because I was like, I want to get as much as I can from this. Like, this is it. And yeah, it was beautiful. And it's cool too because that excitement hasn't ended, you know, as I've gotten like to go to mass all the time. Like obviously I know more of what the mass entails now and I understand like how the mass goes, I guess. But the excitement hasn't faded. Like it's still so exciting to be there and it's still so awesome to just have that opportunity to fully enter into God's presence, but do it in like such a reverent and beautiful way. So yeah,
that was beautiful.
That
was incredible.
It was fantastic. Like God works in beautiful ways. How He's put people in your life. Yeah, just every little step, someone was there.
And to think that you almost like left the state, right? You know what I mean? Like, what would happen like if you hadn't done that? Yeah,
I know. I was thinking about that too. It's like there's just so many none of this would have happened, definitely. Like, I would have been in a totally different spot. And like, that's another thing too, not to say that it would have been a terrible spot, but I wouldn't have been fully able to experience what I am now, which is what's incredible. And like, again, that was always my heart's desire, was to know Jesus more and more deeply. And I knew there had to be more than what I was experiencing. And really the only time that I would experience, I feel like, Jesus' presence was at like worship events that I would go to, like I was mentioning Kansas City and stuff like that, because it was just like, it was so raw and it was so real. But yeah, and now in the Catholic Church, I'm slowly experiencing it, and it's been incredible.
Well, there's a word that you use there that I really love, which is like mystery. I love the word mystery. And I think, God works obviously in mysteries. And like, there's just so many times in your life, especially when you're young, where you're just always constantly questioning like, why is this happening to me right now? Like, why am I feeling this anxiety? Why am I feeling this stress? Like, why can't I figure out what I need to do, what I want to do? And then you just put your trust in the Lord. And then you figure out you might not come for a little while, but God works his magic. He comes in, it could be 2 years, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 2,000 years or whatever in the future, affecting some future people in humanity. Like, he always comes through and he just answers that mystery, right? Like that mystery of like, why do I have this anxiety in my heart? And then you realize at the center of it all, it's just God saying, come to me, right? Like, it's just like the most beautiful thing. And another thing I really thought of that was like really beautiful, that I think is often overlooked, and especially in the gospel, is when Jesus is on the cross, right? And, one of the few people that comes to be with him is his mother, right? Like, Mother Mary is right there by his side, as is John. And, when he says to John, like, behold your mother, right? He doesn't say John explicitly, because he's referring to like the whole church, like, this is your mother, like, behold your mother. It's a kind of an overlooked part, but it's like, it's a big moment,
so
right?
True. Yeah. And that's so beautiful too. Cause again, to think that like, and even just the same thing can be said with the saints, to think that you have those people cheering you on, and that you have those people also like praying for you. And that's something that, at first I thought, this is crazy. Something that helped so much though was, I remember I had friends tell me, well, think of it like you're not praying to them, but you're talking to them. Like, they're like your friends. Like, and I think that's a big thing, especially for Protestants, because the word prayer has so much
worship connotation.
Oh, right, exactly. And so it can be taken in such a different context than it is necessarily.
Mm.
And so, yeah, when I first said this Hail Mary prayer, it was like a crazy experience, because I was like, is this okay what I'm doing? And then I was like, yeah, like this is like my like second mother in a sense. Like, this is like incredible, and she's there for me. Like, she's interceding for me at the Father's feet. Like, that's just so beautiful.
It's incredible.
And that's so amazing. And I actually did my first Mary consecration as well. And I think it was July I started, and then I ended in August. And it was like the 33 days of morning glory or whatever. And it was awesome. Yeah. And it was like, I know, it's crazy. So definitely a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
But
she's pretty incredible. I think one of the things that really helped me out when I was kind of like a little kid, because I was kind of wondering the same thing. I was like, why are we praying to the saints? We pray to God. And like, I remember my mom explaining to me when I was very little, and she was like, they don't need your prayers. You're not praying for them. They're in heaven, right? Like, they do not require any prayers, from you, for their own salvation, because they've already made it, right?
Yeah.
But they want to help you, right? And so like, the only way that you can talk to them is the same way that you talk to God, because they're in the same place. They're in heaven, right? And so you pray to them for that intercession, because they can help you. They want to help you. They know the ways, the path of grace, because they've lived it. You have not. Hopefully you will, right?
Oh, right, exactly.
Definitely not to say that, but they understand much better than we do right now, at least.
And they're beautiful role models. Like, something I've been like thinking about a lot in the last couple of months is with, like, we always talk about social media, but we talk about like social media. People look up to influencers, they look up to actors, actresses, and musicians, and we need to be looking up to the saints. They are perfect examples of how to get to heaven, and they're all broken people. Like, I think it was Father Ueda was talking about. Have you heard that saint that had that perfect life, that just then died at old age? Just beautiful. It's like, it doesn't exist.
Nope.
No saint. Like, they struggle. It shows they're humans, and that we actually can achieve heaven. It's real. Like, we can do it. Like, was it Paul that used to be like killing Christians?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
now he's Paul.
Yeah, literally. It's crazy. And again, going back to that, like, faith produces good works, right? And it goes hand in hand. And that's something that I have seen so much of. And like, even in the Catholic faith, it's these stories of broken people, and it's these stories of like people who were living in sin or whatever. And I mean, some of them weren't, but a lot of saints, like there have been a lot of saints that were living in sin. And then all of a sudden, like their faith and their love for Jesus and, something crazy happened in their life, and that produced the good work in them, that produced all of that in them. But again, it goes hand in hand. Like you can't have one and not the other, you know what I mean? And that's something that the Catholic Church, especially in RCA classes, I have been hearing so much. And again, that was another lie that I believed for a long time. And so it's just crazy to me. But and then something also going on with Mary that in RCA classes I found so cool was, I think also a big thing was like, okay, but Jesus came to save us all. So how would he have saved Mary? That doesn't make sense in my mind if she was perfect. And the priest in my RCA class was talking about Mary this one night, and he said that, okay, so we've all dug ourselves this pit of sin, right? We're all like trapped in this pit of sin. And Jesus extends his hand out to pull us out of that pit, and it's up to us as to whether or not we like grab onto it and pull ourselves out. But the thing with Mary is he also saved her, but he saved her in a different way. He saved her from ever falling into that pit. So he grabbed her arm and he like guided her in a sense. And that was just so interesting to me, because I was like, yeah, so like he did save her, but he saved her in a different way. He saved her like in her purity, in her beauty, and her love for Christ, and for God. And so I don't know, it was a different way of looking at it than I had before. And yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't know, but it makes sense to me in a way. So
yeah.
It
makes sense to me.
Yeah, we're blessed with a really great priests in this area. Like the Diocese of Cleveland's fantastic. Like,
yeah,
I'll give a shout out to Father Patrick Schultz.
Oh yeah, you're awesome.
If you ever want to come on the podcast, let us know.
Seriously,
yeah.
Next episode,
do it. All right,
JK, unless
yeah, this gets one like. But no, I love hearing these stories because like we were both cradle Catholics, so this is all we know.
Right.
Just watching you talk about this story and your conversion, it's just so moving, and you finding Christ and being open to it, and how God put, like I said, all those people in your life to be there when you needed it, like that call, that the priest that you're with at RCIA, like it all
lined up.
Perfect
It's
path.
Crazy, yeah.
Something that you could never do.
Oh
Like,
no,
we could place those people in, but God can.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Life is so beautiful, like, because, God speaks to us in Revelation, right? And like, he does that in so many different ways. Like there's spiritual ways and there's physical ways, right? And so the spiritual ways are obviously, the ways that he calls to you, like in your thoughts and your dreams and, just in your general prayer and stuff like that. But, the physical ways are like just stuff like this, where you meet someone who's just a true witness to something, right? Like there's a really cool line in the Catholic Catechism where it talks about how, one of the ways that God reveals himself to us in a physical way is the Bible, right? Like that's the ultimate witness, right? It's a physical book, right? That we are able to understand things. We're able to somehow understand a little bit of God through a physical way, right? And it's the same thing with like the saints. It's the same thing with like the different Christians and the Catholics that you meet throughout your life, right? They're physical witnesses, they're physical revelations of God's love for you, right? They share like a story like this that's just so beautiful, like it moves your heart, and you're like, man, like I want that so bad, right? Like that's how like you feel when you hear stories like the same way. Like, man, like I want to feel that deep love, like that deep desire for Christ, right? It's just like you said, like there are just some things in life that are just too beautiful to be fully understood. Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Yes, it's not for us to understand.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So you mentioned when you were talking about like your discernment story, how you were worried about what people might think, and like your parents.
Yeah.
Has that been a struggle for you at all, like going through this process?
Yeah, it's been a struggle in different ways. And like I think that's something that the Lord made clear to me though, when this all happened, was that you need to be willing to tell people if they ask you. Like you can't just shy away from it. You need to be willing to. One of the scriptures that I had highlighted too in that time was I think it's 1 Peter like 3:15, and it says like, do not fear them or be troubled by them, but honor Christ the Lord as holy in your hearts, and always be prepared to make a defense for the reason for the hope that is found within you to them, but do so with gentleness and respect. And that gentleness and respect part really hit me, because I was like, okay, like, I want people to ask me about it. You know, I mean, I don't want to just go and like push this on them. Like, okay, guys, so here's the thing. I have to tell you this whole story, and you have to understand it all and accept it all and whatever. But if you ask me about it, like, I want to tell you, like, I want to be open to share it. And so anyways, I came to that conclusion. And so, you know, as people gradually started to hear more and more, and people would ask me about it, like, I was like, yeah, like, I would love to share my story with you. And I did. And a lot of times there was a lot of fear, and a few times there was some condemnation, I guess, in certain aspects. But, you know, even through all of that, like, I can't judge those people. Like, it's not my place to do that. Like, they are worshiping God in the way they know best right now. And that's where I was, you know what I mean? And until like, until the Lord calls you out of that place, or like he reveals something different to you, or I mean, maybe that's where he wants them right now. Is like, I can't be the judge of that as well either. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely been a struggle with some people. And then there's been others that have received it with love, which is amazing. And that's been wonderful to have, like, both sides, I guess. And, you know, I think a big thing too was always finding the perfect timing. I was always scared that, oh, if it's not the right time and they're not in the right mood to accept it, like, it's all going to go downhill. And I have to find that perfect time. A friend told me that Jesus had the perfect time, but people still didn't believe him. The Pharisees still didn't believe him. People around him still didn't believe him. You know, they called him a blasphemer. They called him whatever. And so that kind of encouraged me in a sense to be like, okay, like, if Jesus could make it through that, I mean, obviously he was perfect, so I can't even say that, but you know what? Like, that's my hope. That's who I place my trust in, and he's with me every day, so I can make it through.
No, you can. Like, our goal is to be like Jesus.
Exactly.
And we never can be Jesus. We can be as like him as possible. Like, what would Jesus do, right?
Exactly. Classic.
And
the image of Jesus.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think this has been amazing. And as we're on the podcast, we like to leave our guests with something. Mm-hmm. And so something I was thinking about, like, if someone who feels that tug, that they wants to possibly look into Catholicism, what advice would you give them?
I would say, don't let your preference get in the way of your worship. Don't let your preference get in the way of your response to God, because that's something that I struggled with for a while in my journey to Catholicism. And, you know, we all have preferences for the way we do things, I feel like, in life. But ultimately, like, our worship to God is a sacred thing, and it's something that we'll never fully, I think, grasp and understand it. But if he is showing you and he is pointing you in a direction towards him in a different way than maybe you're used to search it out. Like, don't be afraid to fully search it out and to just dive in, because it took me a while, but I finally got there, and it's been amazing. And also, like, to trust the little mysteries as well, to fall in love with the little mysteries, because they're pretty cool. And like, they're there to prove our childlike faith in the Father. I mean, they're there to show us, they're there to show us who he is in a sense, but also to show who we are in our faith and in our journey with him. And that just builds our history with Christ as well through the journey, I feel like. So, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much
for
coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, podcast 25.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We're out. See it. There you go. Perfect.